Every war has a moment where the rules both sides silently agreed to follow get broken simultaneously. We have reached that moment. Iran fired ballistic missiles at Dimona, Israel's nuclear weapons production and storage facility in the Negev desert, the site never publicly acknowledged as a nuclear weapons site but known to every intelligence agency on Earth for 60 years, was struck this morning. At the same moment, Israel struck Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant on the Persian Gulf coast. Two nuclear facilities, two countries, one night. The mutual crossing of the single red line that every strategic analyst and arms control expert had identified as the threshold beyond which this conflict becomes something fundamentally different from every conflict that preceded it. Before we go deeper, hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. What happened overnight is not an escalation within this war. It is the crossing of a threshold that changes the nature of the war itself. Subscribe now. I will wait. Iran launched ballistic missiles at the Dimona Nuclear Research Center in Israel's Negev desert. The Israeli military confirmed multiple impacts. Emergency radiation monitoring systems were activated. Israel's Atomic Energy Commission confirmed personnel evacuation to protected zones and stated monitoring is ongoing. No radiation release beyond the perimeter has been confirmed as of this analysis. Simultaneously, Israeli Air Force strikes hit the Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran. Iran confirmed the strikes. The plant's emergency shutdown systems were activated. Russian nuclear engineers were reportedly evacuated per Russian state media. The IAEA issued an emergency statement calling for immediate cessation of all attacks on nuclear facilities and warning of radiological risk to civilian populations. Let me walk you through what Dimona actually is because the public understanding of this facility is insufficient for understanding the stakes of this strike. Dimona is not a power plant. It is not a civilian research reactor. Dimona is Israel's nuclear weapons program in physical form. The facility houses what intelligence assessments estimate to be between 80 and 400 nuclear warheads, with the most frequently cited figure being approximately 90. It contains the plutonium production reactor that has been operating since 1963. It contains the reprocessing facility that converts spent reactor fuel into weapons-grade plutonium. And it contains the weapons assembly infrastructure. Israel has never confirmed any of this. Israel maintains a policy of nuclear ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying possession of nuclear weapons. But the global intelligence consensus on Dimona's function is not ambiguous. Iran just struck the location where Israel's nuclear arsenal is physically stored and produced. Read that again. This is not a symbolic strike on a declared nuclear program. This is a strike on the building where the weapons are. Bushehr presents a different but equally severe risk category. It is a civilian nuclear power plant generating electricity for southern Iran under full IAEA safeguards. What makes a strike on Bushehr potentially catastrophic is not a weapons dimension, but a radiological one. A civilian power reactor contains enormous quantities of radioactive material in its active core and spent fuel storage. A strike that breaches containment or the spent fuel cooling pools releases that material into the environment. The Chernobyl disaster involved a smaller and older reactor design than Bushehr. A containment breach at Bushehr, depending on wind patterns, could affect populations across southern Iran, the Gulf states, and potentially Pakistan. The IAEA's emergency statement is not procedural. It is a warning about a consequence that is now a real possibility. Now, what nobody is covering with sufficient analytical depth. The sequence matters more than anything else right now. Who struck first and who struck in retaliation determines the entire diplomatic and escalatory framework that follows. Iranian state media is claiming that the Dimona strike was a response to Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear infrastructure over the previous 24 hours, specifically the Natanz operation covered in yesterday's analysis. The Israeli government's characterization of the Bushehr strike has not yet specified whether it preceded or followed the Dimona missiles. The IAEA's timeline, based on seismic monitoring and radiation detection networks, places the Dimona impacts approximately 40 minutes before the Bushehr strikes were confirmed. 40 minutes. That is the gap between Iran striking Israel's undeclared nuclear weapons site and Israel striking Iran's declared civilian nuclear power plant. If that sequencing is accurate, Israel's strike on Bushehr was a direct retaliation for the Dimona attack, not a preemptive operation. That distinction matters because it tells you the escalatory logic. Iran crossed the nuclear facility threshold first. Israel responded by crossing it in return. Both sides now know the other will strike nuclear sites. The threshold is gone. Okay, I have to be fair. The other side has a point, and several of them are significant. First, Dimona's actual weapon storage infrastructure is hardened to an extraordinary degree. Decades of Israeli defense investment have gone into protecting the facility's core functions against exactly this scenario. The surface structures that were struck may have sustained damage without breaching the deep bunkers where weapons and fissile material are stored. A strike on Dimona's surface is not automatically a strike on Israel's nuclear arsenal. The Israeli Atomic Energy Commission's statement that no radiation release beyond the perimeter has been confirmed is the most important sentence in the entire information landscape right now. Second, Bushehr's emergency shutdown systems, known as SCRAM systems, are designed specifically to safely halt reactor operations following external shocks, including near-miss explosions. Russian-designed VVR reactors like Bushehr have a documented history of surviving significant physical stress without containment breach. The Russian engineers' evacuation is a precautionary protocol, not evidence of breach. Third, the IAEA's emergency statement, while alarming in its framing, is itself a diplomatic tool designed to create maximum pressure for de-escalation. The agency's language is calibrated to be frightening, because frightening language is the only tool the IAEA has. But here's where I have to be direct. The threshold has been crossed. Both sides have now demonstrated willingness to strike nuclear facilities. The deterrence logic that previously restrained both sides from this category of action has been visibly defeated. Whatever prevented Iran from striking Dimona before today no longer prevents it. Whatever prevented Israel from striking Bushehr before today no longer prevents it. The next strike package from either side no longer has to calculate around the nuclear facility taboo because that taboo is now gone. That is not speculation. That is the documented consequence of what happened in the past 12 hours. Here is what you need to watch. The IAEA's radiation monitoring network is the single most important data source in the world right now. Any detection of radioactive isotopes beyond the Dimona or Bushehr perimeters would confirm containment breach and would trigger an international response of a different scale than anything this conflict has produced. Watch it in real time. Watch the Russian government's statement on Bushehr specifically. Russia built the plant, Russia staffed it, Russia has treaty obligations regarding its safety. A Russian statement that goes beyond calling for de-escalation to assigning blame for endangering Russian personnel is a qualitative escalation in Moscow's involvement in this conflict, and watch whether either government uses the word nuclear in their official characterization of what was struck. If Israel officially names Dimona as a nuclear facility in its damage statement, the policy of nuclear ambiguity that Israel has maintained for 60 years ends. That ending has consequences for the global non-proliferation architecture that extend far beyond this war. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. When the IAEA radiation monitoring data is released, I will break down every data point in real time. When Russia speaks about Bushehr, I will cover it immediately. When either government uses the word nuclear in an official characterization of last night's strikes, I will analyze every word because that word, if it appears, ends 60 years of Israeli nuclear ambiguity and changes the global non-proliferation architecture permanently. 2 nuclear facilities struck in one night. The threshold is gone. Evidence first, analysis second. You decide what it means. This is today.